Did you know that just 100 years ago, Americans were sitting down to meals that would land you in serious legal trouble today? Imagine serving up a steaming raccoon stew, roasting wild swan, or even baking a pie filled with passenger pigeons. Yes, those same birds that are now completely extinct. In the 1920s, when supermarkets were still growing and hunting was a way of life, wildlife wasn't just admired, it was eaten. Back then, few laws stood between a hungry family and the wild animals around them. Some of these dishes sound adventurous, others shocking. But together, they reveal a time when survival, tradition, and taste came before conservation. In this video, we're exploring 25 wildlife meals from the 1920s that are now totally illegal, from the farmhouse kitchen to the big city dinner table. Stick around. You'll be surprised what was once considered dinner. If you had to choose, would you try raccoon stew or swan roast? Don't worry, I won't judge much. The 1920s were a strange balance of progress and old habits when it came to the dinner table. On one hand, cities were booming, restaurants were opening up, and refrigeration was slowly changing how food was stored. On the other hand, many families, especially in rural America, still relied on hunting, fishing, and foraging as part of their everyday meals. Grocery stores were smaller, choices were limited, and packaged foods were only just beginning to take hold. If you wanted meat, chances were high you had to raise it, hunt it, or buy it fresh at a local market. Wild game like rabbit, raccoon, opossum, and even birds like pigeon or duck weren't exotic treats. They were practical sources of protein. Families cooked what was available, and in the 1920s that often meant whatever you could catch, shoot, or trade. Wildlife laws existed, but they were weak compared to today. Conservation was still in its early stages, and few people worried about species disappearing forever. Eating off the land was just normal life. This mix of necessity, tradition, and limited regulation set the stage for a menu that seems shocking now, but felt ordinary then. Back then, dinner didn't come from Uber Eats. It came from a trap in the woods. Even though the 1920s looked like an open buffet of wild game, the first steps toward protecting animals were already in motion. In fact, America passed its very first major wildlife law all the way back in 1900, the Lacey Act. This law made it illegal to transport illegally hunted animals across state lines, a move meant to slow down the reckless commercial hunting that had already wiped out millions of birds and mammals. Still, the act was hard to enforce, and in small towns and rural communities, old traditions continued. At the same time, a growing conservation movement was beginning to change public opinion. Leaders like President Theodore Roosevelt had pushed for wildlife refuges and hunting limits in the early 1900s. But in the 1920s, the message hadn't fully sunk in. Most families saw hunting as survival, not as a threat to ecosystems. That's why so many dishes from this era would never pass legal or ethical tests today. In the kitchens of the 1920s, wild food wasn't just for hunters, it was part of everyday cooking. What's shocking today is that many of these dishes are either completely illegal, strictly regulated, or unthinkable now. Let's take a tour of 25 meals from a century ago that would never pass a dinner table or a courtroom today. Passenger pigeon pie. Once so abundant that flocks darkened the skies, passenger pigeons were baked into hearty pies. By the 1920s, the species was already extinct, but cookbooks still remembered it as a family meal. Swan roast. Wild swans were hunted and roasted much like turkeys. Now they're federally protected. Raccoon stew. Raccoon meat showed up in farm kitchens and even the joy of cooking. Today, serving it as dinner is rare to non-existent. A possum with sweet potatoes, a southern classic, now regulated or frowned upon. Bobcat chili. Hunters once ate bobcats. Now predators like them are protected in most states. Bear roast. Roasted or smoked, but now strictly limited. Alligator tail fry, a swamp fry-up. Today, farming regulates it. Turtle soup. Snapping turtles were a delicacy, now widely protected. Beaver tail roast. The fatty tail was roasted, now protected. Coot stew. Migratory marsh birds boiled in stews, now protected. Egret gumbo. Wading birds in gumbo, now illegal. Heron roast. Once roasted like chickens, now protected. Cranes on the spit. Roasted cranes, now protected worldwide. Loon soup. Loons once eaten, now strictly protected. Woodpecker skillet fry. Even woodpeckers ended up fried, now illegal. Owl stew. Owls eaten in rural areas, now a federal crime. Songbird pie. Tiny songbirds cooked whole, now illegal. Eagle drumsticks. Bald and golden eagles hunted, today highly illegal. Wolf roast. Wolves eaten in frontier times, now protected. Coyote stew. Coyotes eaten occasionally, now regulated. Dog meat stew. Eaten by some groups, federally banned today. Cat meat roast. Feral cats roasted, illegal and taboo now. Porcupine roast. Once eaten, now protected in many regions. Crow pie. Farmers shot crows for pies, now protected. Squirrel brains and eggs. An Appalachian dish, now banned due to health risks. Quick challenge for you. If you had to feed 4 people on under $10 today, which of these wildlife meals would you dare to recreate if they were legal? 1. Passenger pigeon pie. Extinct, but once baked into hearty pies. 2. Swan roast. Once hunted, now federally protected. 3rd. Raccoon stew. Farm kitchens loved it, now rare. Before we continue with the video, I want to ask for your help. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and help me out. Okay, let's continue. These weren't bizarre novelties, they were just dinner. But today, they're a mix of illegal, heavily regulated, or simply unthinkable meals. Each one reminds us of how far our relationship with wildlife has shifted in just a century. So why did the menu change so drastically? The biggest reason is conservation. By the mid-1900s, Americans realized that endless hunting was driving species to extinction. Laws like the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, 1918, the Bald Eagle Protection Act, 1940, and eventually the Endangered Species Act, 1973, placed strict protections on dozens of animals that once ended up in stews and roasts. What used to be seen as free food is now recognized as a vital part of fragile ecosystems. Another factor is public health. Many wild animals carry diseases and parasites that can pass to humans. Regulators crack down to prevent outbreaks linked to unsafe meat. And finally, culture shifted. As society grew wealthier, eating pets like dogs or cats, or killing rare birds for the pot, became not only illegal, but morally unacceptable. In short, what was once survival cooking is now a legal and ethical red line. Do you think we've gone too far with food rules? Or are you glad raccoon chili isn't on the menu anymore? Looking back at the 1920s dinner table is like peeking into a different world. For families then, wild game wasn't a luxury, it was survival. Raccoon stew or pigeon pie wasn't strange, it was normal. Fast forward to today, and those same meals feel shocking, even disturbing. The shift says a lot about how America has changed, from frontier practicality to modern conservation, from scraping by with whatever nature offered to protecting wildlife as part of our shared heritage. What our grandparents saw as dinner, we now see as history, and a reminder of how values can change in just 1 century. So, what do these 25 illegal now meals really tell us? They show how food is never just food. It's tied to survival, culture, and the laws of the time. In the 1920s, eating wildlife felt normal. Today, it's a crime in most cases, and for good reason. We've learned the cost of wiping species out, and the value of protecting nature. But here's the question for you. What foods that we eat today might future generations look back on in disbelief? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more food history deep dives. So, next time you complain about eating leftovers, just be thankful it's not owl stew. Hard times and old habits once put wildlife on America's dinner plates, but those days are gone. From passenger pigeon pies to raccoon stews, these dishes remind us of a different era. 25 illegal now wildlife meals America ate in the 1920s. History you can't taste, but you'll never forget.